Well, welcome. We're delighted to have this incredible panel here for extending welcome from faith communities to the U.S.-Mexico border. I'm Cynthia Lang. I'm a senior fellow with the International Law and Religion Studies, and really happy to be here with this Summit of Americas. Now, Maria and I just came over from the summit at the Sheraton that we're having there on a similar panel on migration. And there's a great dialogue going on, some really good questions and some good issues that we can cover today. Also with us today is Sonia Garcia. She's president of Latina Muslim Foundation and has an amazing story to tell us about what they're doing in Tijuana at the border. Marisa Limon Garza is Senior Director for Advocacy and Programming at the Hope Border Institute in El Paso, and also just has tremendous things to say. And as I told her, everything I've heard is El Paso is the model place. So she could tell us how it's done. And Maria Moreno, we are so delighted. Her colleague who was on this panel got COVID yesterday. And Maria has stepped in at the last minute to fill, but believe me, if anybody can fill these shoes, Maria is the Chief Executive Officer of USA for IOM, the International Organization for Migration, and comes with a wealth of understanding. So to give you set the scene for our panel, crossing the U.S.-Mexico border faces many obstacles. It can be very difficult. Many people come because they're in search of refuge, a better life. They're fleeing problems, either health problems or climate problems or violence. There are record numbers of unaccompanied children coming in all alone. All of these things are exacerbated by the potential of human trafficking, and not knowing who you can trust at the border. And the patterns throughout the Americas of people streaming to the U.S.-Mexico border, and the number of different people. I'm told there's more Haitians in Mexico than any place else in the world outside of Haiti right now. There's Ukrainians, there's thousands of Ukrainians in Mexico City waiting to get refugee status there. Mexico is an amazing congregation of people waiting to come across the border, and with that comes all that you can imagine that would come with that. At the same time, people that may actually make it across face, being taken by the Border Patrol, deportation, detention. Even in the best of circumstances, they may be in detention for many years. There's health impact, family separation impact, tremendous mental toll on people as well. So today, each of the panelists is going to take 10 minutes to talk about 3 items that are related to that. First, they're going to tell us a little bit about the work their organization does, or a lot about what their organization does, and then talk about how faith-based organizations can collaborate either with their organization or how their organization as a faith-based organization collaborates with other organizations to extend the services to migrants who come across the borders, either waiting on the Mexican side or crossing into the U.S. Second, how can religious leaders better advocate for policy changes that will positively affect those who seek asylum in the U.S.? And we'll definitely have some discussion on that topic. And then finally, what can faith leaders do to ensure that human rights are protected to all who are in detention or facing deportation or waiting on one side of the border or the other? When that's done, we will have a group discussion, and we're happy to involve you in that as well and take your questions. So we can certainly do that when all of this discussion is over. Feel free, if you want, we'll put questions out to the audience. You can also write them down if you prefer. That's fine as well. So with that, I'm going to turn to Sonia, and please tell us a little bit about your organization and what you do as you address those three questions. En español, o como quiere.
Peace be with you. That is in Arabic and in Spanish. My name is Sonia, and I am founder and president of the Latina Muslim Foundation. This organization is basically been established in 2014. And I think it was the destiny of God to have put me here. I was not looking for what it is that I wanted to do. And given some opportunities that God has given me, we started this project. We went to Tijuana to give some volunteer service. And this is the way that we started discovering that there were many refugees that were also Muslims, men, women, and children. And basically, they were pursuing the American dream. They wanted to come to the United States and Canada. Our organization is a nonprofit organization. It is an international organization. And basically, we are in San Diego. We are working in Tijuana. And well, we do what God tells us we should do. We should help our fellow man, extend our hand to all those that are in need. Basically, the way that we started to see many Muslims arrive in Tijuana, and we focused our efforts on helping because there is no shelter to provide for them. As you know, Muslims have certain rituals that we participate in, like our prayers, the wudu, our food, the veil that we wear. So shelters don't provide this. It was very difficult for a woman to be with other men, or for a family to be with people that basically they were mixed, and then the food. So it was very, very difficult for them. And we started to talk about what it is that we could do for them, how we could help them. And we got the idea to have a shelter. It took us a long time because basically we didn't have any donations. And since it is a Muslim community, it was that there wasn't enough support in order to be able to say that we could form a whole shelter, and that women were forming this shelter, because it is basically women that are working on this. It's not that we don't like men, but I do think that it's easier for us to work amongst other women. And so we started with that idea in 2015, 2016 to start to work. We started selling tamales, tacos. We would make events in the same mosque in order to gather some funds. My partner Lydia was with us from the very beginning. And so it was difficult because we tried to campaign in order to tell people, we need a shelter, please help us. In Mexico, right? So this aspect that Muslims needed a shelter in Mexico, they didn't want to support the project. And thank God he was able to open doors for us. And people started to believe in this shelter idea more. And they said that it was necessary. They could see everything that was happening in the world, and that many people have to flee their countries because they don't want to live in a country full of war, and they have to go, and they have to leave due to poverty or for whatever reason. And so we started to collect funds. We found some property in Tijuana. We purchased it. And since August of last year, we have started gathering the funds in order to open the shelter. And thanks be to God, we finished them. And this Saturday, it is our inauguration. It is a large space, almost 9,000 square feet. It was basically constructed new. It because it was an old building that was there. And we have people already sheltered, 2 African families that have arrived from Africa, from Somalia, and Ina from Ghana. We have people from Chechnya, and we also have Russian people. And basically, this space is there to welcome refugees that arrive from countries where basically their country is war-torn, and they arrive in Mexico, and they need a place in order to pray, they need a place to rest, a place where, even though we might not be the same culture, we do have the same religion. I am honestly very proud to be able to give my Creator what He has sent me here to do. He sent me to form this shelter. And so if you'd like to begin with your questions, well, thank you. Let's keep going. Thank you.
So we'll just do introductions at first. So my name is Marisa Limon Garza. I am the daughter of immigrants. I live in El Paso, Texas, frontera con Ciudad Juárez, Chihuahua, and I am honored and humbled to be part of this panel and to be with all of you today. I serve with the Hope Border Institute, and we're an organization that has a Catholic mission and Catholic identity with a commitment to Catholic social teaching and the understanding of how we serve and walk and accompany is a reflection of our faith. And it's an expression of who we are and why we're here. I see myself as an incredibly privileged individual with a blue US passport. And I completely recognize that privilege of being able to speak 2 languages, to be a cis hetero woman in the world who's tall, which is different. And I recognize that with that comes a lot of responsibility. And I take that seriously. And so it's an honor and a privilege to be here. The Hope Border Institute really focuses on 4 key verbs for our work. We accompany, we investigate, we advocate, and we lead in community. And so what that looks like is a vision for not just the great folks in Washington, D.C. to make decisions for the border, for the wisdom and the knowledge that is rooted in borderland communities like mine to inform policy. And so we share our original investigations and research into what the policies like Title 42, Remain in Mexico, all of these things, metering, have to do with the human reality. And so we document that and we share that out. That then forms the basis of our advocacy and the policy, not just what we're against, but what we're for and what we're trying to envision, imagine, and co-create apart from the realities that we may see. We also don't do this alone. Everything we do is in coalition, in collaboration, in solidarity. And so it's incumbent that we develop leaders particularly of faith, not only Catholics, but people of all backgrounds who identify and really have experiences, encounters, opportunities for formation, for education and engagement. And ultimately, all of this is done with what we say often at Hope is that preferential option for the poor and the most vulnerable. And so where we're situated, that looks like Migrantes al Centro, migrants at the center, a person-centered response. And so this work can quickly get noisy, it can quickly get messy. So many narratives are ascribed to the southern border, so many people have a point of view, so many people have a perspective and a take, a political analysis. And what we know is that this is a human experience. Migration is a fundamental human right. We just happen to be at the doorstep to the United States, and therefore it's our job to welcome, to accompany, and to stand in solidarity. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you. I am fully bilingual, and I will be doing Spanish and English. So I feel comfortable because I am representing here the regional director of IOM. She was supposed to be here yesterday. I have her notes, so I do want to read them in English, but I'm happy to provide answers in Spanish as well. I am Maria Moreno. I am the Chief Executive Officer of USA for IOM, for the International Organization for Migration, the UN Migration Agency. And I am privileged to be working in the United States as an immigrant myself, mobilizing action for the different programs that we have in the world. IOM, the International Organization for Migration, is an intergovernmental body of the UN, and we have 177 member countries. That's probably one of the reasons why we're here in LA, because we are part of the Joint Summit Working Group, which is a group of 13 institutions that provide support to the host government before, during, and after a summit. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that because I really wanted to put into context of how happy I am. This is my 5th summit, and I am young, but every 5 years the summit takes place. And I was an intern when I experienced my first summit in Trinidad and Tobago, in Port of Spain. And I started my career back then, 15 years ago or 16 years ago, when I was a young diplomat. And I've learned a lot since then. But I wanted to put this into context because the reason why I'm here is because I believe on migration. And I am one of those 281 million people, international migrants, that are in the world, which represents roughly 3.6% of the total world population. Then if we say 3% of the whole population, then there's nothing, right, in terms, but when we're talking about 55 million of those are internally displaced persons and are being forced to migrate due to the different conditions, then that becomes even more relevant. 26 million of those are persons with needs of international protection. So we are talking about refugees or those that have the need complementary protection. The region. Why is the Summit of the Americas so important, and why migration is so relevant to this hemisphere? We have the largest receiving country in the world, and we have the largest sending country in the world in one region. That's the United States. For 50 years has been the #1 destination for migrants in the world. And Mexico has been the #1 sending country of migrants. So that becomes very relevant when to that we add 6 million people that have fled Venezuela due to the conflict, poverty, and economic instability. And that 17 countries in this region are hosting those migrants, not including the United States. We have the largest corridor in the world, migration corridor. This is the Mexico and the US border. The next one, it's Syria and Turkey. So just, sometimes numbers just become, boring when we read them on paper, but when we are really analyzing what they mean in our day-to-day, and when we're talking about policy and change, and we need to really look at the big number and how do we scale anything that we do, from the little intervention that we do to affect 281 million people. So IOM, the International Organization for Migration, the UN Migration, works in providing policy, guidance, and governance to its member countries, to 177 member countries. We provide migration management, so we work with governments to address the the challenges and opportunities about migration, because every time that I refer to challenges, I want to say, yes, when there's a challenge, there's also an opportunity because there's a solution. And when I say migration management, it's very important that we talk about that term because we are very cognizant that migration has been posed or its view always as a problem or as something that needs to be solved. Migration doesn't need to be solved. Migration is our reality. We all are moving in such a globalized world like the one today. We cannot talk about, restrictions or not. And we experienced that COVID-19 with all the imposed lockdowns, and we saw a lot of migrants still taking routes and still migrating despite the challenges or the dangers of migrating through illegal routes, posing their lives and their journeys at very large risks. We also saw, and here comes the opportunity, that migrants were the first ones to respond during the pandemic, and they were frontline workers and healthcare workers. So I want to talk, and I know that we are here because IOM and the UN Migration Agency has the privilege to work with faith-based organizations in everywhere that we are. And I have, thanks to my job, being able to be in all the continents of this world. And I can only remember seeing in every single border and every single place that I go, a faith-based organization that is providing the aid, the critical aid that is needed because of the relations that there are with the community. And that sometimes we wouldn't be able to access if it weren't from them. So, in comparison to what you were saying, Sonia, we have large resources and we are the UN Migration Agency, but we cannot do the work without the people that have the access to migrants. So I want to acknowledge the extraordinary work that faith-based organizations are already doing in our region, and notably at the US-Mexico border. We're working with 113 in the northern border of Mexico, and 45 of those are faith-based. Faith-based organizations are uniquely situated to provide critical links to local faith communities in both sides of the border because they can easily facilitate rapid response in complex scenarios, right? Like the one we're talking about when the understanding in a Muslim, for example, context, the understanding of what you were outlining, it's critical for aid. So if we don't know, if the community that they are hosting migrants don't know how does this Muslim communities need the aid to be channeled to them, it's impossible to respect their rights. So this is very important. We also see that it is, we are strong allies in counter the xenophobia and discrimination because you can reshape the current negative narratives toward migration and migrants through the own sayings and teachings and kind of the religious views of the organization that you represent. So we are very happy in IOM Mexico, and these are notes, and I'm sorry because I usually don't read, and I want to just be very conscious of time as well. But I wanted to acknowledge that spiritual and psychosocial support provided by faith-based organizations can enhance the resilience and sustain the sense of belonging of migrant populations. If you're migrating and you're leaving everything behind, and on top of that, you are not respected with your spirituality, I mean, how much worse can it really be? And I think that sense of belonging and connection is critical because after that, they connect with integration mechanism. You start going to church or you start going to mosque and you start, building that social fabric that, the social fabric that you want to pertain to. And it's also important for entrepreneurship opportunities, and this is my real topic because I mobilize resources from from the private sector. That's all I do. I fundraise, I work, like I get money so that more people can be helped. But what I have seen is that entrepreneurship, migrants are entrepreneurs by definition. Venturing in a journey, on the migration journey, it's an entrepreneurship. It's a venture. You are doing risk analysis. You are doing an investment with whatever it is that you have to leave your country. And you are investing in your future. So migrants are entrepreneurs by definition. So that poses them, or us migrants, in an advantage situation. Because if we need to venture for a business, whatever that is, we already know what risk looks like. So I wanted to kind of end, and I apologize for taking too long, but I wanted to say how thrilled I am for being here. It's very special for me because I wanted to have all of that diversity of meetings that I'm having here with government stakeholders, but also civil society and the private sector and philanthropy. So I'm really happy to be here and take any questions. Thank you.
We're thrilled. Thank you. So let me go to the panel, and I'm going to throw this out and let each of you take a minute. The question that the conference posed is, how can faith-based organizations collaborate better to extend services to refugees and migrants? I have to say, I spent a couple months studying how faith-based organizations collaborate to prepare for the summit, and there's an immense amount of collaboration. There's a lot of good collaboration happening. If you want to take the question and talk about what you think the highlights of the good collaboration, you can take that as well. But please, let's start with Sonia.
These are the points that I think, working on the border with San Diego and Tijuana, I think these are very important points that not very many organizations take into account, because many of them only go for a little bit. They go and help for a few days, but they don't know what's really happening. But I want to talk about this question. First of all, they have to organize and base it on the needs of people immigrating, because not everybody has the same needs. There are immigrants, there are refugees. So we have to base ourselves on those 2 points. What does each individual and family need? And number 2, we must ask local governments to participate, educate them, not the immigrants or the refugees, but the leaders. We must educate them in how to treat these immigrants and these refugees. Take human rights classes. Unfortunately, there are many times where the authority arrives and they trample this immigrant that's trying to come to the United States or into Canada, and we don't take this into account. And they feel that because they have the authority, they have the power to do it. But I do think that we have to go to local governments and local authorities, be it in San Diego or El Paso or any border. The basis of the governments are public workers. They must understand the needs of these refugees. We must demand that the system be changed. There is a great amount of corruption that is stifled by these people because it is for their benefit. Between politicians and the military, we must educate them how to treat them, what their job is as a public servant. That is why we have so much violence at the border, not because of the immigrants or the refugees, but it is they themselves, because they don't have the education and they don't take into account what the needs are of these people. And like I mentioned, they feel that because they feel that they have authority, they feel that they are greater than this person because they have a uniform and they have a gun, and they want to treat people badly, and they feel like they can trample on these people. And this is something that all refugees experience and all deported people experience. They are afraid. They are afraid of authorities, of the local authorities. And if we, as organizations, begin to draw attention to these things, especially these points I mentioned, we will have a great amount of change. And we want to let the local organizations know we are here and we are here to defend the vulnerable. I think these are the points that I have seen not being considered. And I think we set them on the wayside. Thank you.
I have a few slides. I'm wondering if now is a good time to share them. Thank you, Blythe.
I just want to say while they're coming up that we so appreciate your background. Thank you each for giving that. I love what you said, Marisa. Incredibly privileged. I always felt like by accident of my birth, I was born on the right side of the border, and it gave me so many advantages. And we don't do this alone. I think it's probably the theme of this whole session today. We don't do this alone.
Thank you. So this is an image of matachines, indigenous dancers at the southern border in a community in El Paso, right across from a community called Anapra in Ciudad Juarez. And this is a faith service that we had at the border that I think exemplifies a lot of who we are and also shows what we are not or what other people ascribe to us. So it's important to recognize that my community is one that was birthed of colonization. It's a community that once was Mexico, is now the United States, has been both, is one region, El Paso and Ciudad Juarez. It's a community of people of faith, largely Catholic, but not exclusively. We have many different faiths that are part of our home. It is a militarized zone where now I remember growing up in a time before the border wall, before NAFTA, before razor wire and drones and checkpoints and all of these things that are now part and parcel of life on the southern border. It is a community that, while wealthy in culture, in identity, and in faith, does not have a lot of economic opportunities, but it's still a place where people choose to live, to work, to play, to pray. We don't have the comfort of binaries. We live in the gray. We are often having to have nuanced conversations, and it's some things that we wrestle with despite the perspectives of others. The number one employer in our community is the military, and the path to the middle class, and many times, is to work for an enforcement agency. And so we have political ramifications, we have lived realities, we have different experiences, and we have numerous challenges, yet numerous opportunities. So that's the background about my community that I think is really important. So when it comes to walking with and accompanying people in solidarity, the work that we do at the Hope Border Institute is a reflection of the community at large, which, as I said, is a faith-based response. So policies like metering, basically telling people to wait or to get in some kind of line in order to seek protection within the United States, was incredibly damaging and problematic. Sonia and I actually realized that a woman that we helped accompany, who unfortunately passed while in Ciudad Juarez, her name is Jamila. My colleague Edith walked with her on her journey, and unfortunately Jamila passed in Ciudad Juarez, and she is a Muslim woman. And there was a lot of challenge to try to get her to have the kind of burial and service that followed those rites. And so my colleague battled with the Fiscalia and went round and round to make sure that her wishes and her family wishes were respected. And it was someone and organizations and groups of people of faith, like Muslim sisters and brothers, who raised the funds to give her a proper send-off. And we just realized this an hour ago. And that's the spirit of the culture, the community, the faith, the collaboration. We're a lot closer than we think we are. This picture is of our Bishop Sites from the Catholic Diocese of El Paso, welcoming people to a migrant shelter that he opened in his own backyard at the Pastoral Center where we office. People are there today, again, staying. When thousands of people were released to the community in 2018 and 2019, we received them with open arms, not free of challenge, but also with the spirit of understanding. Our community is one of many immigrants, and so it's not something that is lost on us when someone is trying to find their way. It is through this program that we launched the Border Refugee Assistance Fund, a partnership with the Catholic Diocese of El Paso, where we provide all different kinds of support and humanitarian assistance for people on the move in Ciudad Juarez. Because as much as this was a beautiful moment for us to receive people, it all ended once Remain in Mexico was implemented and everything was pushed south. So where there used to be one migrant shelter in Ciudad Juarez just 3 years ago, the Casa del Migrante, there are now over 18, all different levels of sophistication, all different walks of life, from 1 or 2 human rights organizations concerned with migrants like Derechos Humanos Integrales en Acción Día. Now all of the UN is present, World Central Kitchen. I think the United States would be shocked to know that all of the supports that we might think of happening in Poland, or we might think of happening in Syria or Ukraine, are at our doorstep. And all of those infrastructures of the United Nations, of UNHCR, IOM, UNICEF, all of these organizations have bases in Ciudad Juarez and are responding to this right now. And it's something that not many people connect the dots on. This is an example of a manta, something that we built, we printed out of desperation. We encountered this when accompanying migrants and asylum seekers. This is in response to Title 42, the public health loophole that's been used to seal off the border from people seeking protection. And what this looks like is we were receiving people that were flown from South Texas, 800 miles away, to El Paso, to then be expelled to Ciudad Juarez, because there was no more capacity to take people in Tamaulipas. And so what this looked like was families with small children getting off of transportation, being escorted across the bridge, and having no idea where they were. They were lied to. They were told they were going to a shelter. They were told they were going to the United States, which technically they were. But then they had no idea where they were. And to witness and to walk with and hold that pain, that suffering, the mothers telling me, me engañaron, they lied to me, is palpable, it's real. And so we, in partnership with all the organizations that are listed at the bottom, had a hospitality site that developed very quickly to try to help respond. And while we asked the US government multiple times to explain their policy to the most directly impacted people, they wouldn't. And so we had to create an infographic to say, you started here, you're now in this location, and how may we walk with you? And so that looked like giving people a pair of shoelaces, because they had their shoelaces taken away. That looked like giving a stuffed animal to a child, because a child will be a child will be a child wherever they are, in whatever condition they're in. And a parent is freaking out because they have no idea what to do. They have no idea where they are, and they have little to no resource. And so to give the parents a reprieve, it's like, let's give the child something to do. If we take care of the children, then the parents can figure out their things. And so this has been a horrible thing to witness and to understand. And again, the privilege that I have as a citizen in the United States, it's painful to know that this is happening in my name and for my protection. This slide exemplifies what people of faith in El Paso have done to respond. We were very privileged, and it was an honor to watch the end of the first version of the Remain in Mexico program. This was something the Biden administration committed to and ended, and with our partners at IOM and UNHCR, we were able to help over 1,000 people, I believe over 2,000 people in our little part of the border, exit the program with dignity, with honor, with respect, with COVID protocols, with a safe, orderly, and humane process. And it, by no means perfect, but a far cry from some of the horrors that we've seen. We established the Frontera Welcome Coalition, a group of over 100 organizations and individuals really committed to helping migrants find their way. And this was the idea of having a welcome at the port of entry. As people exit, there was no government protocol. They're free to go about their business in the United States, but we knew it was important to provide a human experience and a dignified welcome. And so we had volunteers of multiple faiths and backgrounds come and literally say, bienvenidos, welcome to the United States. And we would invite people to take a moment to catch their breath and to take it in. Because for so long, many of these people, over 2 years, they've been waiting in a limbo of uncertainty in Ciudad Juarez, in a shelter or on the streets, enduring trauma, enduring violence, persecution. And now they made it to this, what we were joking about earlier, this American dream, whatever that is, right? And so now they're able to access it. And so while we only had a few minutes to help them get to a bus and maybe get to a shelter or then go on with their families, it was a moment of encounter and walking with an expression of faith and solidarity and human dignity in a very briefest of moments to say, let me help you carry your bag. Let me recognize your child. Let me walk with you. And that was an incredible moment and an expression of faith. We are talking about families. We're talking about young children. A lot of our systems and structures at the southern border were designed for single adult men, largely from Mexico. And our systems do not reflect the needs of current people on the move, many of which are young. Last summer at a federal shelter in Ciudad Juarez, a colleague and I taught a summer camp for children based on STEAM, science, technology, engineering, art, and math. And I met a young boy. The majority of the children in the class were internally displaced people from the state of Michoacan. And it was lovely. I'm a teacher at heart, and so I'd love to get back into those settings. I went again to the same shelter 2 months ago, and it was painful because that same child that was in my class, I was happy to see this child. It's always wonderful. But that child was still at that shelter 9 months later. And all I could think of was, these are formative years for this child. And like many children impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic, this child hasn't had a formal education. This child has been in a migrant shelter with over 600 people for the last 9 months. And what does that do to a child's mind and to a child's perspective? What does that look like? And so we know that this is something that is real, it's important, and it's something we hold paramount. And finally, I'll just end with this quick reflection from a student. These are images of people of faith walking in solidarity. There's a lot more people, even though some of the most extreme views get the most clicks and the most microphones, there are people who are wanting to do this work. What we're trying to do is find enough avenues for them to meaningfully engage. And so this is a reflection from a young person who just joined us as an intern and did her first experience in a migrant shelter. And she said, my first task was letting the migrants know the following steps after their negative COVID test and eating. While the families waited to meet with staff to figure out how they could get into contact with family members, I played soccer with the kids, talked to a little boy about the animals on a toy, and answered the questions of migrants. After all the families did their meetings, they went to get clothes and showered. I would show families where to shower and go back to get another family. I met people from all different destinations, like New York, the Carolinas, Virginia, and New Jersey to meet family or friends. It shocked me that yesterday migrants came from India, Peru, the Middle East, and Brazil. I only used to think about immigration from Mexico, Honduras, El Salvador, Nicaragua, Guatemala, República Dominicana, and their nearby countries. The variety of languages spoken by migrants surprised me. At first, I began speaking Spanish with them until I eventually realized some were speaking Portuguese and Turkish. Despite language barriers, we eventually understood each other. I saw families testing positive for COVID, complicating their path to their next destination. I saw single mothers with a baby, mothers with one child or two children. I saw families. I saw a little boy reading to his little brother. I felt sad. I cannot believe that this country does not realize the harm and damage they cause to thousands, affecting millions just for wanting a safe and better life. Yet regardless of the situation, every migrant was composed with a goal in mind. I saw strength in the parents and kids. One moment that made me smile was witnessing a kid that spoke Turkish, playing soccer with another boy speaking Portuguese, showing each other tricks and doing their best to communicate. It was heartbreaking to hear a mother with her son separated from her daughter and son in the detention center. She said an officer told them they had to be separated. She was on the phone with a family member trying to locate her other children. She was scared. I was scared. All I could do was hug her and hope everything is going to turn out okay, hoping that she will find her other children. It is not fair people have to go through this pain that is avoidable. Accompanying someone means looking beyond immediate concerns, showing compassion, and accompanying one another from the beginning to the end. So tomorrow, the people with no voice will have their voice and will be heard. Thank you.
Thank you. We could take a minute. So understanding that, and thank you, because I think that that's the part I think many of us are, I think you expressed it well, that people just don't understand. We wish every American could go down for just a day and to see the things that are happening and change their perspective on their life. So with that tone and with the things we've talked about, how do you think religious leaders can better advocate for policy changes that will positively affect those who seek asylum in the U.S.? Think about that. As faith-based organizations, how do you advocate and keep a godlike attitude at the same time? Some faith-based organizations will not advocate politically. So how does a faith-based organization take that thread, that needle, and thread that needle and be able to do that? And I will throw that open to anyone on the panel and not in any particular order.
I can share that it begins with, and I can speak from the perspective of the United States. We often look at other parts of the world and think about democracy as something fragile in other places. And yet our democracy is incredibly vulnerable. And that requires that we don't get to take a pass, that we have to be actively engaged. And it's the same with faith-based groups. A lot of times when I'm working with parishes, there's a perception that the political is dirty and that the religious is clean. And therefore we don't do that. We're about sacraments. We're about prayer. And I think we miss the mandate to engage. It's not easy and it's not fun all the time. Yet we have to. We have to. And lean into that, especially religious leaders, lean into that moral authority. It's too damaging and the harms are too large. And we're so much more interconnected than we'd like to think. And it requires that we think together, collaborate, and find common ground. It will be messy. It will be hard. We may lose part of our flock in doing so. And it's still the right thing to do.
It's a very strong question because basically we don't want to enter into politics. But as religious leaders and of faith, I believe we have to be the voice of the people. in all countries, there are something called voting. Vote. It is our right. And I think as people, it's not only vote for whom I like or because I think is a good prospect, but see their work since they started. What is that they offer? More than anything, the promises as they speak, when they say, I'm going to do this, I'm going to solve this. I believe we should see and work hand in hand with the community. I think when you work with the people who want to be part of politics and they want to be part of change, work with them hand in hand and to see what the need is of the people who emigrate to these countries. Because in our Latin American countries, that doesn't exist. There is no, like in the United States, that there is a vote that is respected. Not over there. There's unfortunately corrupted. It's the power that seeks instead of helping people. But I think that is being done away with. In humanity, there is no love to the person, to your neighbor, mercy. That doesn't exist. That is being done away with. That is finishing. It exists in your spirituality as people. We're leaving that to one side. Unfortunately, many of us leave aside what the religious aspect, and we focus in other things that are not worth, and we leave our faith. We are poisoning ourselves slowly but surely. But as we do so, well, what does it matter to us if 1,000 Haitians are coming in or 1,000 Latin American, Colombians, Peruvians, Venezuelans, people who are in their own country, they have a war, that there's too many injustice, and they don't want to leave their countries, but for whatever reason, I mean, for what they're going through, they have to leave, and we don't care. So what? I live in the United States. I'm rich. I have money. Love to that human being is disappearing. It doesn't exist between ourselves. We can say, yeah, let's help them. Let's give them a plate of food. But mercy, what our God, our Creator taught us, the morality that we've given in our homes regarding religion, we are losing that. Love towards humanity, to say, what heritage do I want to leave behind? How can I advocate? How can I meet with other organizations to tell them, as Marisa says, unfortunately, there is that circle of kindness that exists in our souls that should not be over. Should all have it. If we let it go, our spirituality, imagine we're like a tree that needs water. Well, we are like a tree that we need God. And when your faith, you can understand society better. Why are the refugees coming? You can understand if we gather together, if we work together, not individually, with people that are going to be part of a representation in Congress, whatever. If we're going to say, if this country has a lot of money, this has power, we want that person to be welcomed if they want asylum. Let's open the door. Whether they said that there is no need for them to jump over a wall or to sell their homes to pay a coyote. It is very frustrating. It's painful. They know when people come to the border, they come with desperate, and our authorities, we ourselves as human beings, if we don't reach out to them, basically we treat them bad, and they come and we tell them, you're refugees, leave this country. Imagine with what dignity are gonna come and start from scratch. We have to be a little more conscientious, and to know how to unite, be their voice, give opinion, and say this is good, this is wrong, this is right. We want to demand this. Why? Because we are the taxpayers. We are the ones who are working. The people who come to immigrate, they also provide, not only us. These are people who raise the land. They want to come to sacrifice, to come. They come to work. They don't want to hurt. They want another opportunity to return to the country in the future, if they want to raise up a house or be here. They want to be given opportunities. Unfortunately, we judge too much and we do too little. Thank you.
Any, not necessarily being a faith-based organization, but seeing hearing the answers, which I think are very real and difficult, especially for faith-based women sitting here. Very powerful woman panel. But what thoughts do you have about advocating, and how any advice?
I've been trying to think, because I'm reading what they told me, like what's on the paper, and I appreciate that, but I'm really looking at it from the perspective of mobilizing action, right? Like, how can we, because you need resources to do what you're doing, and it's amazing work, but you need resources. And because when not in particular the US, but what I'm seeing is, like, sometimes migration, right, and all of this flows happen in countries that are already underserving their own population. And, the needs just increase and pile up, and we're requesting, policy change and more respect and all of that, but at the same time, there are no resources to be able to support that, even if it's valid and needed and proven. So I always tend to think about, there's a bottom-up and a top-down approach. The bottom-up is, really influence, like with your coalitions, this interreligious coalition, right? Because you're both saying the same things, from two different perspectives or religions. So how can you use that power to leverage policymakers at the state, the local, state, and federal level, right? Like, how do we bring those messages? And then from what I was saying about resources, where, in the United States, $480 billion are channeled every year through charity. 480 billion, according to Giving USA. And that's more than the international foreign aid. And we're talking about one country. And religious institutions are the #1 recipient of these resources. And 70% of this $480 billion are given by individuals from all classes, right? Like, not high net worth individuals only, but from all economical backgrounds. So I'm just trying to say, because every time that I read those numbers, it means, for me, in like what I do, which is international programming, like, I mobilize resources for the world, not talking about the United States. I am only tackling 6% of that funding, because it's where most of those individuals want to support international programs. But I think that you have 94%, those $480 billion in charity that you can tap into, because you are building community. You are closer to those people than I am, because I'm trying to take their funds to go somewhere else, to take it to the world. But I feel that a lot of the work that you could do is also to influence policy is, and look at this, right? We have resources, the community is supporting, our donors who are the community, the host communities, are in pro of that change or that acceptance of policy change. So I'm just looking at it from sometimes just asking for the policy change won't change. We need to, work on ways that we can influence that with data and with initiatives that have been proven to work.
I appreciate that. That's a fabulous perspective, particularly from somebody who deals with resources for this issue around the world constantly. I would probably add being part of a faith that is adamant about being non-political for many very good and valid reasons. I can still choose to be political. Just because my faith doesn't, I can advocate for people who don't have a voice. I can stand up and do that. I can create organizations like these women have. And so even if your faith doesn't, I think the Lord put you here so that you could love other people. And you do it in the way you can. And so I think, and you will find like-minded people. And this is a place to do that as well. You will find like-minded people who care about others. Earlier today, I talked about a lot of research I did about what's happening in communities throughout the United States with welcome centers and, not at the border. The border, my grandmother used to talk about the First World War. She was in Germany. And the border is worse now than my grandma's First World War stories. It is shocking and just distressing. And it's right here at our border. And yet, as people do get into the interior of the country, there are amazing stories about communities changing and learning to love other cultures and love people and bring them in to their, and I think that potentially drawing through some of that back to action at the border, and I would say it's not just resources, although I love how you think because almost everything is resources, but there's also policy. And policy is a little different and has different motivations and has been maybe hijacked or turned in some ways, And so I think that, thinking about ways to help, and Washington is just a tough place. I know I've spent almost 40 years thinking about immigration legislation. I started at the Justice Department under the Reagan administration. We could get any immigration law passed back then. We have not been able to get any immigration legislation passed in decades. So how do you get policy changed when you can't get, any kind of, advocacy? So those are all questions and problems people at the border have. So we have been asked, actually, this is not just a panel to share your thoughts alone, but this organization, FIDELA, the conference, the forum, wants to be able to make recommendations to the summit organizers for things that could be taken away. So I am going to give you each, ask you for 2 recommendations that you would like to see taken to the summit organizers as a result of our discussion here. And I'll give you a minute to think about it. And is there a burning question out here from anyone in the audience that you'd like to have addressed while they're thinking about that? Yeah. Because we have a few minutes left, so we'll end with your recommendations.
Yeah, thank you. João Diniz from World Vision. Follow-up question to Maria. 2 weeks ago, I was in Panama with your colleagues IOM and UNCR to talk about this new route of the Venezuelan coming to the north, and they were explaining that they are more vulnerable because they don't have the network that support them, so it's more challenge for them. As you mentioned, the importance of the faith communities or faith-based organizations, the coalitions to influence, I wonder what would be the role of IOM, to support the government, because that's true what you said, that in all the countries in Latin America, we see that the faith-based organizations are supporting the migration there, but they are not recognized as part of the system to respond to support this. What role could play our IAM could play, to help the governments to understand and to formally recognize and support the role that these coalitions of the faith-based organizations are playing, supporting the migrants? Thank you.
You want me? I can answer that question. I cannot take recommendations to the summit, but I can go ahead and answer.
Okay, that sounds good. Yeah.
That's just to put into context also the question that our colleague our friend is asking. Panama is host to one of the most dangerous routes in the world, and it's called the Darien Gap, which is a jungle type of no one there, right? And I know that migrants cross deserts and rivers, and there's nothing that can stop that venture that I was talking about, right? And when sometimes the risk, far overweighs, the benefits of migration, the Darien Gap is really a place where, it's unbelievable, but it's very, very dangerous. So because of that, international aid or even local aid has not been established as it has been in other countries, right? Like speaking about the Venezuela response, Venezuelans leave Venezuela, cross Colombia by foot, and they cross all Colombia by foot, and then they get to Ecuador, and then they keep walking and keep walking and keep walking until they get to Peru. And so again, even that walking journey is not comparable to the Darien Gap, because they're crossing cities and they're crossing, places where there's just, so much coordination already. We're talking about the largest exodus of migration in the history of Latin America and the Caribbean. So what we need, is it's to build, so first of all, raise attention, right? Raise the visibility. I don't know how many of you knew about this issue, but certainly not everybody knows about it. So the number one is, how do we elevate that? It's an issue. Migrants, not only Venezuelans, are crossing the Darien Gap. There are Haitians that are crossing from the Darien. There are people, extracontinental flows going, through the Darien right now, and it's coming to the U.S., and then it will mix with, the old traditional flows of Central Americans and Mexicans to the United States. So I think that an important thing we should do is collect evidence, as well as we raise visibility, collect evidence of what's going on, what are the needs. And I think IOM, and your specific question is, what can IOM do? And IOM is really good at collecting data through our displacement tracking metrics, and I hope that we could use that, or we could deploy DTM in Darien, so we can interview and survey all of these needs and put it into a piece of paper and start talking about it with numbers. Right now, we don't have capacity there. As we speak, I was able to close a deal recently with a big funder in the United States, at least to provide dignity kits and first aid kits, because there's nothing, absolutely anything. If you have, a small cut or injury, there's not even a Band-Aid that you can get to. So how do we, collect all of these needs and assess and start kind of building a lot of awareness around the topic? I think that governments are taking a lot of importance to this topic, and that's the reason why it was so prominent in Panama. And I think IOM cannot do this alone, and it will have to be with a consortium as we work in every single response in the world. It has to be part of the response cluster, right? IOM doesn't do anything alone. We have a food cluster, we have shelter cluster, we have a protection cluster, water sanitation and hygiene cluster. So we are talking about how do we can really all get together to be in the Darien, regardless of the real dangers that imposes even to those that want to provide critical aid. So I know that is a topic of discussion nowadays, and it's being addressed. Thank you for the question.
And thank you for taking that answer. I want to start as we go to these suggestions, just saying something I think observed earlier today is that this isn't a solution that one country can solve. Everybody's waiting to see what the U.S. is going to do on migration this week, and it doesn't. In some ways, that's just a Band-Aid. These are migratory patterns across the hemisphere. Frankly, as you said, the Darien Gap has people from Africa, from Asia, from all Middle East. It's incredible. These are migratory patterns, issues that are worldwide, and they're complex. And it's going to take, a group of organizations to be able to solve. Not one organization even can do it, and civil societies like this working together, because and the OAS is probably very well suited because of the region being so impacted, but it's going to need input from civil societies and others to be able to solve these problems, because it's not one country, not one organization. They are too complex to be able to solve. With that, let's go to Sonia. And could I ask you, I'm so sorry, in 3 minutes to give your suggestions, approximately 3 minutes. So give your 2 recommendations that the conference would pass on to the summit, and any other concluding remark you have.
Okay, well, I could tell you there are many things.
And can I tell you, if you have more than you want to say here, we will sit down together and we'll put it together.
Sí, no.
Absolutely.
Sí.
We will take it to the summit.
When you're in Washington and we're in the border, it's a different thing. You live, see, and you are there with them. You are part of them. And in Washington, well, there's only by TV, there's a little bit the information that is being given, so nobody has idea what is going on there. If I could reach them, my voice, I would give them 2 recommendations that I think that it's based in human being, and is the voice of the immigrant, of the refugees to Washington. I would ask them that they would more sensitive, that they would be more human beings, that they would help the people that is oppressed, the vulnerable people, the people that needs. I think that they really strive. They want to live, and they want another choice. They come broken, they come in a bad situation with stress, they come from violence. Anyway they come, and they're looking for a better life. It could be in a country of like United States of Canada that are more sensitive to the problems, and they would be in their shoes for a little bit. And then if they could, as me, have faith and we believe in a God, that they will have the chance that they deserve, that they were looking for, that they wouldn't be so hard, and they have a migratory reform that will help them to increase their dignity, to set up as human beings. Many of them have the self-esteem very low, and they don't believe in themselves. Their dreams are broken. They are told many lies, and when they come to the United States or Canada to another country, economically strong, well, they want to have documents not to be illegals. So then they need help. Yes, just try to put their hands in their hearts, and for the love that they have to God. They have a migratory reform, and I believe that being legal for a while, and that will be able to have a citizenship. They will basically will give them back their dignity and life, because the countries where they come from, maybe they have the opportunities, but many times because of the economical situation, they don't have the same opportunities that we have in the United States. United States, a country that opened the doors to a lot of people in education, especially, and that they can grow here. And this country, which is big, so yes, that get the help for them so they can be able to stand up again humanly, that to do it because of humanity and for the love to God. Thank you.
Yes, yes.
I would offer to Summit people, encourage them, especially my colleagues from the United States, to remember that there is no real meaningful conversation on any of the summit topics, including migration, without an analysis of the role of US imperialism and white supremacy and the way that has impacted migration, extraction, and use of human and natural resources from throughout the Americas. And so any kind of attempt to address this work has to start with that and has to be anti-racist in nature. I would also strongly encourage from a migration lens, but this also ties into climate and into economic prosperity, into other avenues, is meaningfully addressing the drivers of migration, not just as a means to end migration to the southern border, which I think is the political goal, but realistically thinking about ways that people can thrive at home, and that people have the right to migrate or to remain at home, and they should be able to be in a home that is dignified and loving, where they can find meaningful work, where they can contribute and provide for a family. Finally, I would offer that, again, to my fellow folks from the United States, this is not the time to externalize our problems. This is not the time to create structures that move the problem away as if migration were a hot potato and it's in somebody else's lap. This is the time to marshal resources, to come together as a people, remember our stated values, and to welcome people out of abundance and not scarcity. And to really demonstrate, as President Biden has said time and again, and restore the soul of our nation. And the only way we can do that is as it's defined by the people that we walk with and accompany at the southern border. So I would invite us all to think about that and to not fall victim to the political analysis and the points that can and can't be scored before the midterm elections, and to really think about the long game, building centers of hospitality and welcome that are funded and resourced and championed by all levels of government, because we recognize that the United States is better the more diverse we are.
Taking notes. Well, we're at the end. Thank you all for the amazing work you all do. it's easy to be discouraged, and I don't mean to be Pollyannish about that, and it's easy to wonder if good people still exist. You know, as we believe in our religion, we must help bear each other's burdens. We mourn with those that mourn, and we comfort those that stand in need of comfort. We believe the second greatest commandment is to love our neighbors. And I said earlier, it's less of a commandment and really more of a passion. I know that exists. I know people are there. And it can be a true source of joy in their lives to serve all God's children. And as a faith-based conference today, that is, I think, what we should continue to seek. So thank you so much for all you do, all of you, and appreciate your time here today.